Have you ever felt that the more you chase someone, the more they pull away from you? And that ironically, the ones who seem indifferent are the ones who spark the most desire? This is not a coincidence, it's psychology. More specifically, it's the psychology of Carl Jung. Today, you'll discover 7 psychological triggers that make anyone feel an almost uncontrollable urge to chase you. But be warned, what you're about to learn has nothing to do with cheap seduction tricks or cliches from self-help books. What's about to be revealed is rooted in deep archetypes of the human psyche, invisible patterns that shape behavior, emotions, and decisions. And when you apply this the way others perceive you changes completely. You stop being just another person, and you become magnetic, impossible to ignore. These are techniques used in silence by powerful names in cinema, politics, and even marketing. But now, they'll be in your hands. Get ready to awaken desire, create deep connections, and master a secret language that most never notice. A language that isn't spoken with words, but with presence, intention, and behavior. Because once you understand how to activate these triggers, you stop chasing and you start being chased. James was 24 when he realized a painful truth about relationships that no one teaches. He did everything right. He was kind, attentive, always available. But for some reason, he couldn't explain. It only seemed to push people away. The messages left on read, the dates that never repeated, the constant feeling of trying and never being chosen. The truth is, James was an emotional pursuer. He wanted connection, but his behavior created repulsion. Until one day, while reading an old journal on Jungian psychology, he found a sequence of ideas that would completely change the way he related to others. And that's when the 7 triggers began to appear. The first was the trigger of value inversion. The more you show that you need someone, the less value you seem to have. This activates an unconscious response of disinterest, based on the scarcity principle. When something is always available, the brain assumes it's not that valuable. James realized he had to stop proving his worth and start living it. He changed his behavior. He stopped replying immediately. He stopped asking too many questions. He started observing more, talking less, and strangely, people started chasing him. The second was the trigger of emotional self-sufficiency. Emotionally centered people radiate something Jung called archetypal energy. It's the kind of presence that doesn't beg for validation. It attracts by being whole. James realized that when he stopped seeking external approval and started nurturing his inner world, his connections changed. He became the prize, no longer the competitor. Then came the third trigger, controlled uncertainty. The human brain is programmed to seek patterns, but when something or someone breaks that pattern subtly, creating doubt and curiosity, the mind becomes hooked. James started to alternate presence and absence in a smart way. He knew when to be fully present and when to disappear just enough to be remembered. He didn't vanish. He created space. Space to generate desire. Space to be pursued. These first 3 triggers were the turning point, but the most powerful ones were still to come. Because the next 4 are based on deep archetypes hidden in the collective unconscious. Forces that have shaped human behavior for thousands of years. Triggers activated, not by words, but by sensations, by symbols, by postures that go beyond logic. And this is where James's journey transforms. Because he wasn't just learning how to make people chase him. He was learning to access a level of influence that almost no one understands. A level where there is no effort, only magnetism, only presence, only silent power. James's transformation wasn't instant. It was built layer by layer. With each new behavior, he felt the world reacting differently. And it was in that process that he discovered the 4th trigger, the trigger of emotional mirroring. This trigger is based on a deep principle in Jung's psychology. The unconscious doesn't respond to words, it responds to reflections. When you can subtly mirror emotions, Without copying, you create a silent, almost mystical connection. James learned that by reflecting the emotional energy of others with intelligence, he wasn't just accepted, he was felt. In a conversation, for example, if someone spoke with excitement, he responded with proportionate energy. If the tone was more introspective, he adjusted, not like an actor, but like someone who knew how to move with the emotional rhythm of the other. This activated something invisible, a feeling of, this person understands me. And humans are wired to seek connection with those who understand their emotions, even if it's never said out loud. But that wasn't all. The fifth trigger was the one that solidified the change, the trigger of rare vulnerability. And this is where most people get it wrong. Too much vulnerability makes you look needy. Too little makes you seem fake. The secret, according to Jung, lies in the shadow, the part of our psyche that hides our pain and insecurities. James understood that by revealing selected parts of his shadow, he created a bond of truth with others. In a conversation with Emma, for example, he shared how he had always felt insecure about being enough. But he didn't say it in desperation. He spoke calmly, with presence, expecting no consolation, just telling the truth. That disarmed Emma. She opened up too. And in that moment, an emotional bond was born. The human brain associates sincere vulnerability with trust, but only when it's accompanied by solidity. And that's what separates someone magnetic from someone who is just nice. The magnetic person is real, but steady, exposed, but secure, felt, but not desperate. James was no longer just noticed. He was remembered, sought after, desired. But the last two triggers, the ones he would discover later, weren't just about desire. They were about narrative control, about primal archetypes that activate ancient instincts in the human brain. Instincts that shape behavior before logic has a chance to intervene. And these final two triggers are the most powerful, because they touch something ancestral, something almost no one understands, but something present in every human interaction. And when James activated them, there was no turning back. The people around him didn't just notice him, they couldn't forget him. The sixth trigger was the one James took the longest to understand, because it didn't show up as a specific behavior. It was more subtle, invisible, almost spiritual. He discovered it during a deep psychology seminar, where a professor spoke about the fusion of Jungian concepts with ancient Eastern practices. The professor said, "True power is not about imposing yourself, but about being inevitable." That's when James first heard about the trigger of timeless presence. This trigger has deep roots in the archetype of the sage, one of the pillars of the human psyche, described by Jung as the symbol of silent knowledge, the one who doesn't need to speak to be heard, the one who, when entering a room, shifts the emotional field of everyone around without saying a word. This type of presence isn't built through appearance, nor through clever phrases. It comes from the fusion of focus, intention, and emotional mastery. And this is where ancient wisdom comes in. In old Tao Te Ching texts, there's a passage that says, "The master remains still, and so everything moves around him." That is the principle. When you master your internal state, you stop reacting to the external world, and as a result, you begin to control it. James began to practice silence, to look into people's eyes more than he spoke, to breathe before responding. He wasn't in a hurry. He didn't over-explain. He listened with full presence. And that caused a silent impact on people, because most live in a state of constant agitation. And when someone shows up with presence, with centeredness, with that energy of "nothing shakes me," other people's brains recognize it as emotional leadership. What's curious is that this trigger doesn't just create attraction, it creates fascination. People started saying how strange it felt to be around James, how he always seemed to be in control, how he made time feel like it was slowing down. This wasn't a trick. It was energy cultivated with intention. And this, according to Jung, is what separates the unconscious individual from the realized one. The unconscious keeps reacting, The realized one creates the field. But here comes a crucial point. All 6 previous triggers are powerful. They change behaviors, relationships, reputations. But the 7th trigger is of a completely different nature. It touches a deeper layer, a level that is almost primitive, and that's why it can't be revealed yet. Because once you understand what this last trigger is, you'll see everything that's been said so far in a new light. And maybe, for the first time, you'll understand why some people enter your life and never leave your mind. The 7th trigger isn't something you learn from ordinary books. It's not taught in communication courses, and it doesn't show up in the most popular videos about social psychology. Yet, it's the most powerful of them all. James only came into contact with it after a silent retreat, where he spent 7 days without speaking a single word. On the final night, the retreat facilitator said just one sentence to him. The greatest power is to be felt without being understood. And that's when James understood. The 7th trigger is the trigger of archetypal mystery. This trigger is activated when you embody elements that the collective unconscious recognizes as enigmatic, unpredictable, incomplete. Carl Jung studied this deeply. He said that mystery activates the process of projection. People begin to fill in the blanks with their own desires, fears, and fantasies. In other words, the less you reveal about yourself, strategically, the more fascinating you become. James began using silence selectively. He didn't reveal everything at once. He created pauses. He looked deeply, but never gave it all away. He avoided obvious statements. He preferred ambiguous phrases that left room for interpretation, small gestures that seemed to say something, but without explaining what. This made people think about him even when he wasn't there, because he left open questions, emotional gaps. And here's the point. The human brain hates gaps. When a story has no ending, it stays alive inside the mind. And that's the secret of the 7th trigger. You become an unfinished narrative, a book with no final page, a movie that ends before the last scene. And people, without realizing it, keep coming back to try to understand. They come back to try to complete the puzzle. James became unforgettable, not for being the most attractive, not for being the most outgoing, but for being impossible to fully decode. People felt that there was something there, something they needed to discover, something that pulled them in, and the more they tried to understand, the deeper they got involved. But there is a real risk in using this trigger. If applied poorly, it creates distrust. If used with ego, it becomes manipulation. And that's why, in the next segment, you're going to learn exactly how to use the trigger of mystery in an ethical, conscious, and magnetic way. Because true power lies in leaving behind traces that lead back to you, even when you're no longer around. James was no longer the man he used to be, the one who kept chasing, trying to be accepted, trying to prove his own worth. He didn't need that anymore, because now he understood how the human mind works on a level most people never even glimpse. And that didn't make him manipulative. It made him free. Instead of reacting, he chose. Instead of seeking approval, he selected connection. He was no longer the pursued or the pursuer. He was the center, the axis. The 7 triggers he mastered changed everything. The trigger of value inversion freed him from the need to please. The trigger of emotional self-sufficiency put him in control of his own energy. The trigger of controlled uncertainty created space to be desired. The trigger of emotional mirroring connected him deeply with those who crossed his path. The trigger of rare vulnerability opened doors that only authenticity can open. The trigger of timeless presence gave him a silent strength that dominated any room. And the trigger of archetypal mystery made him unforgettable. But the most powerful shift happened inside. James stopped feeling that constant emptiness, that ache of not being truly seen, because he finally started to see himself clearly. And when you see yourself with clarity, you become irresistible to those who are ready to see too. This is psychology. It's neuroscience. It's human behavior applied. But above all, it's awakening. The circle was complete. That sentence, he once read from Jung, now held a deeper meaning. What you accept transforms you. He had accepted who he was, accepted his shadows, his desires, his strengths, and because of that, he had transformed. More than that, he had become a presence that changed those around him. Emma, who once seemed distant, now sought him out, not with anxiety, but with admiration, with true interest, because the magnetism he carried now came from within. And when that happens, you no longer chase. The world begins to revolve around your orbit. But what you might not realize yet is that these triggers aren't just tools to attract someone. They are tools to earn respect, to build influence, to reclaim your identity. And the next step goes even deeper. But there was still one question James kept asking himself, and maybe you're asking it too right now. What if all these techniques, these triggers, these psychological principles are just the surface? What if there's a deeper layer, an eighth invisible element, something that can't be taught, only awakened? Because in the end, the real game is not making others chase you. It's becoming someone so magnetic, so integrated, so complete that the entire world feels your absence when you're not around. In the next episode, you'll discover what the silent masters of the East called the core of presence, an inner state that transcends any technique and turns your energy into pure power, unexplainable and inevitable. But before you go, do this. If this content brought you value, if it opened a new vision of yourself and the people around you, then give back in the simplest and most powerful way possible. Click the like button right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes. Turn on the notification bell so you're the first to know when the next part is released, because it will be the most revealing of all. And drop a comment below with just one word: presence. If this video touched you in any way, write presence in the comments so I know you're walking this path of evolution and magnetism with me. And if you know someone who needs to stop chasing and start being chased, share this video right now. They'll thank you later. See you at the next level.